Hello and welcome to Bharat Rising. Today we are gonna talk about the introduction written by Vivek Devorai in his translation of Mahabharata. And it starts here. The Hindu tradition has an amazingly large corpus of religious texts spanning Vedantas, Vedangas, Smritis, Puran, Dharma Shastra, and Itihas. For most of these texts, especially if one excludes classical Sanskrit literature, we do not quite know when they were composed and by whom. Not that one is looking for single authors. Some of the minor Purans like Upapuran are of later vintage. For instance, the Bhavishya Puran, which is often listed as Major Puran or Mahapuran, mentions Queen Victoria. In the listing of the corpus above figures Itihas translated into English as history. History does not entirely capture the nuance of Itihas, which is better translated as this is indeed what happened. Itihas isn't myth or fiction. It is a chronicle of what happened. It is a fact, or so runs the belief. And Itihas consists of India's two major epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The former is believed to have been composed as a poetry and later as a prose. This isn't quite correct. The Ramayana has segments in prose and the Mahabharata has segments in poetry. Itihas does not quite belong to category of religious text in a way that the Vedas and Vedanta are religious. However, the dividing line between what is religious and what is not is fuzzy. After all, Itihas is not about attaining objectives as dharma. After all, Itihas is also about attaining the objective of dharma, arth, kam and moksha. And the Mahabharata includes Hinduism's most important spiritual text, Bhagavad Gita. The epics are not as a part of Shruti tradition. That tradition is like revelation without any composer. The epics are part of Smriti tradition. At that time, they were composed, there were no question of text being written down. They were recited, heard, memorized and passed down through the generation. But the Smriti tradition had composer. The Ramayana was composed by Valmiki, regarded as the first poet or Kavi. The word Kavi has a secondary meaning as a poet or rhymer. The primary meaning of Kavi is someone who is wise, and in that sense the composer of Mahabharata was no less wise. This was Ved Vyas or Vyasdev. He was so named because he classified Vyas the Veds. Ved Vyas or Veddev isn't proper name. It is a title once in a while in accordance to the need of the era. The Veds need to be classified. Each such person obtained the title and there have been 28 Ved Devs so far. At one level, the question about who composed Mahabharata is pointless. According to popular belief and according to what the Mahabharata itself states, it was composed by Krishna Dvaipayan Vedvyas. But the text was not composed and cast in a single stone or a single point of time. Multiple authors keep adding the layers and embellishing it. Sections just keep getting added and it is no one's suggestion that Krishna Dvaipayan Vedvyas composed the text of Mahabharata as it stands today. Consequently, the Mahabharata is far more unstructured than the Ramayana. The major sections of Ramayana are known as Kand, and the one meaning of the word Kand is stem or the trunk of tree, suggesting the storyline. The major section of the Mahabharata are known as Parv, while one meaning of the word Parv is limb or the member or a joint. In its nuance, there is a greater fluidity in the word Parv than in the Kand. The Ved Vyasadev we are concerned with had a proper name of Krishna Dvaipayan. He was born on an island, Dvip. That explains the Dvaipayan part of the name. He was dark. That explains the Krishna part of the name. It wasn't only incarnation of Vishnu who had name of Krishna. Krishna Dvaipayan Vedvyas was also related to the protagonist of the Mahabharata story. To go back to the origins of Ramayana is about the solar dynasty, while the Mahabharata is about the lunar dynasty. As to be expected, the lunar dynasty began with Som, the moon, and goes down through the Pururava, who married the famous Apsara Urvasi, Nahusa and Yeti. Yati became old but wasn't ready to give up the pleasure of life. He asked his sons to temporarily loan him their youth, but all one refused. The one who refused were cursed that they would never be kings, and this includes the Yadavas, descendant from Yadu. The one who agreed to was Puru, and the lunar dynasty continued through him. Puru's son Dushyant was made famous by Kalidas in Dushyant Shakuntala story, and their son was Bharat, contributing the name of Bharatverse. Bharat's grandson was Kuru. We often tend to think that Kauravas were as the evil protagonist in the Mahabharata story, and the Pandavas as the good protagonist. Since Kuru was a common ancestor, the application of Kaurava applies equally to the Yudhishthir and his brother and Duryodhan and his brother. Kuru's grandson was Santanu. Through Satyavati, Santanu fathered Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. However, the sage Parasara had already fathered Krishna Dvipayan through Satyavati, and Santanu had already fathered Bhisma through Ganga. Dhritarashtra and Pandu were fathered on Vichitravirya's wife by Krishna Dvipayana. The story of the epic is also about these antecedents and consequence. The core Mahabharata story is known to every Indian and is normally understood as dispute between Kauravas and Pandavas. However, this is distilled version, which really begins with Santanu. The non-distilled version takes us to the root of genealogical tree, and at several points along this tree we confront a problem with impotence, sterility, death, resulting in offspring through a surrogate father. Such sons were accepted in that day and age. Nor was this a lunar dynasty problem alone. In Ramayana, Dasarath of solar dynasty had an also infertility problem, corrected through a sacrifice. To return to the genealogical tree, the Pandavas won Kurukshetra war. However, their 5 sons through Draupadi were killed. So was Bhim Ghatotkacha, fathered on Hidimba, as was Arjun's son Abhimanyu, fathered on Subhadra. Abhimanyu's son Parikshit inherited the throne in Hastinapur, but was killed by a serpent. Parikshit's son was Janmejaya. Krishna Dvipayan Vedvya's power of composition were remarkable. Having classified the Veds, he composed the Mahabharata in 1,00,000 sloks or couplets. Today's Mahabharata text does not have many sloks. Even if Hari Vams, regarded as epilogue to the Mahabharata, is included, one reaches 90,000 sloks. That too is gigantic number. The Mahabharata is almost 4 times the size of Ramayana and is longer than any other epic anywhere in the world. For a count 90,000 Sanskrit sloks, we are talking about something in the neighborhood of 2 million words. The text of Mahabharata tells us that Krishna Dvipayan finished the composition in 3 years. This does not necessarily mean that he composed 90,000 sloks. The text also tells us that there were 3 versions of Mahabharata. The original version was called Jaya and had 8,800 sloks. This was expanded to 24,000 sloks and called Bharata. Finally, it was expanded to 90,000 to 1,00,000 sloks and called Mahabharata. Krishna Dvipayan did not rest even. After that, he composed 18 Mahapurana, adding another 4,00,000 sloks. Having composed the Mahabharata, he taught it to his disciples. To his disciple Vaishampayan. When Parikshit was killed by a serpent, Janmejaya organized a snake sacrifice to destroy the serpents. With all the sages assembled there, Vaishampayan turned up and the assembled sages wanted to know the story of Mahabharata as composed by Krishna Dvipayan. Janmejaya was also wanted to know why Parikshit had been killed by the serpent. That's the background against which the epic is recited. However, there is another round of recounting too. Much later, the sage assembled for a sacrifice in Namisaranya and asked Lom Harshana, alternatively Rom Harshana, to recite what he had heard at Janmajaya's snake sacrifice. Lom Harshana was Sooth, the Sooth being charioteer, and bard or a recounter. As the son of a Sooth, Lom Harshana is also referred as the Southi. But Sauti or Lumhar son aren't quite the proper name. His proper name was Uruk Sarva. Sauti refer to his birth. He owes the name Lomhars to the fact that the body hair stood up on hearing the tales. Within the text, therefore, two people are telling the tale. Sometimes it's Vaishampayana and sometimes it's Lomhars. Incidentally, the stories of Quran are recounted by Lomhars without Vaishampayana intruding. Having composed the Quran, the Krishna Dvaipayana taught them to his disciple Lomharsana for what it is worth. There are scholars who have used two statistical tests to try and identify the multiple author of Mahabharata. As we are certain, there were multiple authors rather than single one. The question of whom Mahabharata was composed is somewhat pointless. It wasn't composed on a single date. It was composed over a span of over 1000 years, perhaps between 800 BCE and 400 ACE. It is impossible to be more accurate than that. There is difference between dating the composition and dating the incident, such as the date of Kurukshetra War. Dating the incident both subjective and controversial and is irrelevant for the purpose and of this translation. A timeline of 1000 years isn't short, but even then, the size of corpse is nothing short of amazing. Familiarity with Sanskrit is dying out. The first decade of 21st century are quite unlike the first decade of the 20th. Lamentation over what is inevitable serves no purpose. English is increasingly becoming global language. Courtesy colonies, North America, South Asia, East Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, rather than the former colonizer. If familiarity with the corpse is not to die out, it needs to be accessible in English. There are many different versions or recessions of Mahabharata. However, between 1990 and 1966, the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, that is called BORI, in Pune produced what has come to known as the critical edition. This is an authenticated text produced by a board of scholars and seek to eliminate later interpolation, unifying the text across various regional versions. This is the text followed in this translation. One should also mention that the critical edition's text is not invariable smooth. Sometimes the transition from one slok to another is abrupt because the intervening slok has been weeded out. With the intervening sloks included, a non-critical version of the text sometimes makes better sense. On a few occasions, Vivek Devarai had temerity to point this out in the notes which he had included in his translation. It took a long time for this critical edition to be put together. The exercise began in 1919. Without Harivams, the complete critical edition became available in 1966, and with the Harivams, the complete critical edition became available in 1970 only. Before this, there were regional variations, and in the text, the main versions were available from Bengal, Bombay, and the South. However, now one should stick to the critical edition. Though there are occasional instances where there are reasons for the dissatisfaction of what scholar of Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute have accomplished. But in all fairness, there are two published versions of the critical edition. First, one that has the bare bones of critical edition text. Second has all the religion version of included in the notes also. The former is for the ordinary reader, assuming he or she knows Sanskrit, and the latter is for the scholars. Consequently, some popular belief no longer find a place in the critical edition. For example, it is believed that Sage Vyasa dictated the text to Ganesha, who wrote it down. But Ganesh had a condition before accepting. Sage Vyasa would have to dictate continuously without stopping. Sage Vyasa threw in a counter condition. Ganesh would have to understand each couplet before he wrote down, to flummox Ganesh and give himself time to think. Sage Vyasa threw in some cryptic verse. This attractive anecdotes has been excised from critical edition text, bearing material that is completely religious. The Sanskrit text is reasonably easy to understand. Oddly, he had the most difficulty with the things that the Vidur sometimes. What he said, Arya had sometime today cannot ethnicity. Originally it meant language. That is, those who spoke Sanskrit were Aryas. Those who did not speak Sanskrit were Malays. Vidur is supposed to have been skilled in Malay language. Is that the reason why some Vidur's statement seems obscure? In similar vein, in popular rendering, when Draupadi is being disrobed, she prays to Krishna. Krishna provides the never-ending stream of garment that stump Dusasans. The critical edition has excised the prayer to Krishna. The never-ending stream of garment is given as an extraordinary event. However, there is no intervention from Krishna. How is Mahabharata classified? The core component is the couplet or the slok. Several such slok forms a chapter or adhyay. Several adhyayas forms parv. Most people probably think that the Mahabharata has 18 parv. This is true. But there is another 100 parv classification that is indicated in the text itself. That is the adhyayas can be classified either according to 18 parv or according to 100 parv. The table is shown in the video. This is based on critical addition, so make the clear. As the table shows, the present critical addition only has 98 parv of the 100 parv classification, though the 100 parv are named in the text. Thus, interpreted in terms of Bhori critical addition, the Mahabharata no longer possesses 1 lakh sloks. It's supposed to have. The figure is little short of 75,000. 73,784 to be precise.